today I wanted to talk about neck pain and how I treat it as a physical therapist. Now, I want to go over a big misconception I see about neck pain and then kind of understand some muscles and joints that are typically involved, and then some really simple exercises you kind of might be doing already that can really help pay huge dividends in getting rid of your neck pain. So, the first thing I want to talk about is a common misconception I see involving neck pain, and that is that posture is the main cause of neck pain. Research shows that posture is not related to neck pain. There's people who have really slumped posture who don't have any neck pain at all. There's people who have quote unquote great posture who do have neck pain. So the biggest misconception I see with folks is we spend all day at a desk, obviously, working on our computer in a hunched posture, and then they think that they need to spend the rest of the day back in a military posture, shoulders down and back, head up, chest up, things like that, and then they kind of walk around there. Now, that is something that you've been told, and I see online. I completely understand why people go there, but really it's actually exacerbating the problem. So a couple muscles that I'm going to talk about that are really involved in neck pain are the upper trap, so your muscles in your shoulders here. So if I'm pulling my shoulders down and back, I'm putting a ton of stretch on those upper traps, which if they're already irritated, can just make them worse. Imagine if you had a bicep strain, and so you walked around all day like this, stretching your bicep out as much as you could. You wouldn't do that, it wouldn't make any sense. But with the neck, we often think we need to really stretch things to get in postures that are uncomfortable and then hold them for as long as possible, creating stiffness and stress in there. So the biggest thing with posture is trying to relax, a comfortable posture for you, even if that is bent forward a little bit or rounded like that, but then also moving, so exercise things like that. So I want to talk real quick about a couple of those muscles that I mentioned and then show some exercises that can definitely help with your neck pain. So in order to understand neck pain, it's important to understand the muscles and joints that can be involved in neck pain. So I want to talk about just a couple of muscles that could be involved. Obviously, there are many, many muscles in your neck and shoulders, but I want to focus on two main ones I see as a physical therapist. So the upper traps are the first muscle. A lot of people have heard of these. They run from the base of your skull all the way down to your scapula or your shoulder blade, and then all the way into your thoracic spine, so your mid back here. There are these big triangles that are coming through here. Now, those can be pain in that can be caused by weakness, can be caused by posture, sometimes overcorrection of posture, like we talked about. But the tricky thing is they're involved in a lot of stuff. So upper trap tightness can cause shoulder pain, thoracic pain, cervical pain, headaches, typically the side of your head, but it depends on your symptoms. But they're an important muscle to use and look at because they're so involved with everything in this area. Another group of muscles that I like to look at are the suboccipital muscles. So those are the base of your skull connecting it to your first two cervical vertebrae. So if you think about if we're kind of stuck back here a little bit, that's compressing those suboccipital muscles instead of being forward like this to let them stretch. Now they are very important in rotation. About half of your neck rotation comes from your first two cervical vertebrae. So if they're very stiff, I'll see a lot of clients who really struggle with turning the neck where they have to kind of turn the whole thing just to turn because they're not able to get a smooth, movement from there. They're also very commonly cause headaches that can come around in a ram's horn pattern. Could be in the front, could be back here. So they're an important muscle to look at to get that upper cervical mobility back. Now, it's not just important to look at the muscles, it's important to look at the joints themselves. The cervical spine itself can be stiff, but also the thoracic spine down below the mid-back. Imagine if my mid-back is stiff and I try to turn and I can't because this doesn't move. That's going to create more stiffness and pain in there. It can kind of be a chicken and egg thing of what came first, the muscular pain and tightness or the joint. Regardless, it's important to address both through manual therapy and exercises to get a full resolution of symptoms. So now I want to talk about some actual exercises that I use now that we understand the anatomy of the neck so we know why we're using the exercises. So when we're talking about decreasing neck pain, the first thing I always look to is manual therapy. So I'm not going to show anything, but things like dry needling, massage, joint mobilization, scraping, all that can be helpful just to loosen things up and get things moving better. But of course, manual therapy by itself is never the answer. We need to follow it up with therapeutic exercise because once we mobilize everything and get things moving, we have a much better window in order to get stronger, get more mobility with exercise and kind of reinforce our gains that we got from manual therapy. So two simple exercises I love, laying on the table, specifically focus on the suboccipital muscles, but a little bit of the upper trap. The first one is a chin tuck and lift, where we're going to be strengthening those little muscles in the front here that are often weak because we end up stuck in this position a little bit, and stretching out the muscles here in the back, the suboccipital muscles, to help with that rotation and that stability. Another exercise that I love is laying on your side and just rotating your head up and down. This is working on endurance and strength in those neck muscles. You'd be surprised if you have neck pain how quickly those neck muscles shut off because they're used all day, so they lose the ability to actually engage and do something. And in doing that, it causes them to relax because if you actually use a muscle more than its capacity, it'll then relax and you can get a little more mobility after that. It's also working on stability of the upper trap. So those are a couple simple exercises I like to start people with on the table to really work on some strength and stability and mobilize some tough to reach areas in the neck. So once we've kind of mobilized and strengthened the cervical spine itself, I want to turn and look at the upper thoracic spine and some muscles involved in that area. Because like I said, that can play a huge role in cervical tightness and pain with those muscles and joints in the neck. So simple exercise is using the foam roller to work on thoracic extension. So cupping your head, I prefer squeezing your shoulder blades apart like this, lifting your hips up, doing a bridge, and just rolling back and forth on that foam roller is really going to isolate the thoracic spine and avoid you overcompensating through other areas. It's going to help mobilize the muscles, the joints. You might feel a little pop. It should feel good to help loosen things up in that thoracic spine so we get more mobility in our cervical spine. A more aggressive stretch is known as the prayer stretch, where you're going to use a bench or something like that, put your elbows up. This is really stretching your lats, the muscles down here, but also working on thoracic extension, where we're going to sink our hips back, bring our hands up over our head, and try to extend our thoracic spine, bring our chest to the ground as much as possible to really open up this area. It's an aggressive stretch, but it is really helpful for folks to understand and work on that kind of overall mobility in that area. So those are two great ways to attack thoracic mobility to help improve cervical mobility and pain. It's important that we include some direct strengthening for the upper traps and the muscles in that area. So like I mentioned, the mistake a lot of people make is they just overly stretch them with their posture. So simple exercises to strengthen the upper traps are a great idea to get moving. Any sort of shoulder exercise when done with good mobility is going to use the upper trap because it's used to rotate your scapula up and down. So anything going overhead is going to be a great exercise for that. A great starting exercise are lateral raises, just taking the weight out to the side and lifting it up. That's going to really work on stability through here while also getting good rotation there. But there are a bunch of exercises you can do to get that upper trap moving. The biggest thing that I see in people is when they're doing those exercises, they're still cueing down and back, and then they kind of get limited here and get uncomfortable. Just try to relax, let it move. That's going to let that upper trap move the best and get the strongest, which is going to help prevent neck pain in the future. So that's it. That's the video about neck pain. Hopefully this fixed your neck pain. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I think the important thing is to have an idea of what's going on, to understand some basic anatomy, some movement, because that's the biggest thing I want patients, clients, viewers to take away, is understand your body a little bit better and you can understand how it moves, because you need to be able to problem solve on your own. Too often we throw fancy terms out there, we worry people that their disc is bothering them, and we don't actually explain, hey, these muscles are bothering you, look at this joint mobility, things like that. So if you have a better understanding of how your body moves, you can correct on your own. And if you're not able to correct through videos or online things or trying stuff out on your own, then you go seek out a professional like a physical therapist. So try things on your own. If that really doesn't work, go see someone, get an assessment so you can actually figure out what's going on, individualized plan of care for you. If you have any questions, let me know. I appreciate watching. Thanks.